slip inside the eye of your mind. Don't you know you might find a better place to play? Today I'm going to spin you a yarn. I'm going to spin you a yarn about humanity. I'm going to spin you a yarn about history. I'm going to spin you a yarn about community and arts and culture and technology and Manchester. But first, I'm going to spin you a yarn about the brain. Literally. This ball of yarn represents the human brain as it existed 70,000 years ago when our Homo sapiens ancestors roamed the African savanna with their tribes. Just like this ball of yarn, in their brains, ideas would overlap. Notions would thread in and out of each other. Multiple connections would come together in an instant and then move on to some other clump of thoughts. Information and images would go pinging around this brain with wild abandon. This brain was 100% free association, intuition, and creativity. And there was a good reason for that. You see, 70,000 years ago, our ancestors were the weaklings of the African savanna. Smaller than rhinos, slower than tigers, no hides, no horns, no fur. Basically, they were hors d'oeuvres. And the only reason they survived was this oversized, creative yarn ball brain, which combined their senses, their savvy, and their communication to keep their tribes always one step ahead of the tigers. Now, scientists tell us that our brains have not materially changed in 70,000 years. It's still the same. 100% free association. Think of the last dream that you can remember. Think of your last conversation with a toddler. This is the brain in its natural state. This is its happy place, creative. And yet, sometimes us modern-day humans, we seem to have lost sight of that fact. So I'm going to spin you a yarn about how we slowly stopped using our brains as they were intended. Humanity's long, complicated history as a result, and how we in the world of arts and culture can thread creativity back into humanity. Now let's go back to Africa all those years ago. For tens of thousands of years, humans quietly existed. They raised their families, they relied on their tribes, and they used this cunning yarn ball to survive. Now, it will come as no surprise to learn that 65,000 years of creative tranquility was shattered by a single tax accountant. Let me explain. So about 5,000 years ago, we started to cultivate crops and domesticate animals. The tribes stopped roaming. They created permanent settlements that became villages, that became kingdoms, that began to tax their citizens. And in order to tax people, the kingdoms had to keep track of those people and their possessions. But the problem was this. This creative yarn ball brain isn't very good at keeping orderly track of thousands of transactions. And so some intrepid Sumerian tax accountant scribbled some symbols on a clay tablet to keep track of all of those transactions and accidentally invented the written word, text. So what's so bad about text, and why am I giving this ancient Sumerian tax accountant such a hard time? Well, the answer to that can be found in an amazing book called Sapiens by Dr. Yuval Noah Harari. In Sapiens, Harari explains that for the first time, text made our brains work differently than intended. Rather than this free associating yarn ball, text forced our brains to function like a filing cabinet. Text made us think in lines of symbols and numbers. Text made us sort and group. Far different than the freewheeling, free associating days of the African savanna. Text took a small part of our creative brain and replaced it with this. The neat columns and rows of the logical brain. Orderly, rational. Text marks the moment where our brain conceptually split in two, the logical side and the creative side. And as we spent more and more time on the logical side of the brain, we started to neglect the creative side. And humans started to feel a deficiency of creativity. So let's talk about deficiency. So it's one of the really interesting things about our species, that we can actually find supplements for our own human deficiencies. Hundreds of years ago, sailors would go out into the ocean for months at a time, and they wouldn't eat any fruits and vegetables. And lots of them died from scurvy, which we now know is a deficiency of vitamin C. So we started stocking those ships with vitamin C-rich fruits and vegetables, like this lemon. And the sailors remained healthy. We found a natural supplement for a human deficiency. And everywhere you look, you can see supplements for human deficiencies. Naked Homo sapiens wouldn't last very long out there in cold, rainy Manchester. So they put animal pelts on their bodies to supplement a deficiency of fur. And here we had another deficiency. As we spent more and more time on the logic and the thinking and the analytics of the logical side of the brain, it was almost as if the creative side of our brain conceptually was shrinking. And what did we do to supplement that creative deficiency? We invented arts and culture. What is that feeling you get when you see a beautiful sculpture? Why do we sometimes cry at wordless music? What is that sense of awe when you see an engineering marvel? None of these feelings are required for our survival, and yet we will express them countless times in our life. Why? I think that arts and culture is humanity's multi-millennia journey to supplement this ever-deepening deficiency of creativity in our brain. Look, you can go out into the ocean for months at a time, but you need lemons to survive. And you can spend lots of your life on facts and figures, but you need arts and culture to thrive. Now, we humans, we've pondered this split for eons in different ways with different names. Head versus heart, sensing versus feeling, left brain, right brain. To keep it simple today, I'm going to call this side the logical side of the brain, and this side the creative. If the logical brain gives our lives order, the creative brain gives our life meaning. Now, I experienced a wonderful example of this not long ago at our friends, the National Portrait Gallery in London. It is, as an institution, at once both creative and logical. It is an art museum organized around the linear chronology of history. And I will say, I started my tour very much in logical mode. I wandered past portraits of kings and queens and explorers and thinkers, and I cataloged their information. And my head was filled with facts and figures, and then I happened to turn a corner and came face to face with her. And my logical brain went out the window. And my heart welled up. You see, she reminded me of my own little girl who at that very moment was about 5,000 miles away, and I missed her. The bloom of pink on her cheeks, the flaxen hair. It was a real yarn ball moment for me. So I just stood there with her for a while, and I just kind of hung out, you know? Just like maybe I would have all those years ago in the African savannah. See, philosophers will tell us that when you're working with your logical brain, you work on the object. You work on the painting. You look at the little tag on the wall and read the facts and figures. But with the creative brain, it's the exact opposite. You don't work on the painting. The painting works on you. The painting works on you. This painting worked on me. It supplemented a deficiency I didn't even know I was suffering from. Not all that different than the lemons for those scurvy suffering sailors of old. Have you ever had this kind of feeling? Like you just swallowed a whole bunch of vitamins and you feel all energized and giddy because of culture? I mean, it makes sense. What we do actually supplements a human deficiency. We're filling a gap. So here's something to ponder. What is the supplement that your organization is providing to your community? Right? If the world is suffering from creative scurvy, what kind of lemon are you? So we humans are neat. We figured out how to use natural supplements for our own deficiencies. But actually, there's something we can do as a species that no other species can. We don't just find supplements. We can create new ones. Humans are creators. You know, at first, nature gave us the lemon and we used it as a supplement. But then we started to create. We took lemons and we created this. Actually. It's been a long day, guys. Delicious. This is an excellent source of vitamin C. You see, we took lemons and we made lemon meringue pie. We supplement and we create. I'll have a little more later. So let's think about this in the context of arts and culture. So all those years ago, with text, we had a creative deficiency. And so we began to supplement it. We sang simple songs. And we drew simple drawings, and we danced simple dances, and we told stories around the bonfires at night. And we looked up into the night sky and wondered about the world all around us. And then slowly over time, we went from supplementing to creating. The lemons became pie. Those simple songs, why, they became the beginnings of opera and chamber music. And those simple drawings became the beginnings of painting. And the simple dances became the beginnings of ballet. And those stories that we told around the bonfire, well, those became the beginnings of drama and recorded history. And when we looked up into the night sky or looked at the world around us, that was the beginning of philosophy and science. And for thousands of years, the rise of arts and culture supplemented our creative deficiency. And then everything changed again. 5,000 years ago, human life changed because of text. And 200 years ago, human life changed again because of textiles. You see, the Industrial Revolution, it started right here in Manchester with the birth of the textile industry. And advances in engineering brought forth the spinning jenny, the mechanical loom, the huge factories. And armies of Britons left their fields and their farms, and they flocked to the textile mills of Manchester. And soon those factories popped up all over the world. And now the Industrial Revolution, it did some amazing things. Life expectancies, wealth, quality of living, all of those things actually went up during that time. But the Industrial Revolution, well, also had a pretty big impact on the creative side of our brain. Because people left the pastoral countryside and they moved into the crowded, grimy cities. And lives that had really followed the rhythms of the sun and the moon, now they followed factory whistles. And lives that had been governed by the four seasons, they were now governed by offices and by timetables and by ledgers. And those tight-knit tribal villages that everyone lived in, you know, those started to be replaced by faceless factory foremen, all logic and cold efficiency. And the quiet contemplation of the creative brain was slowly sapped away and replaced by the ever-growing, relentless, workaholic, logical side of the Industrial Revolution. And all of a sudden, the creative side was alarmingly puny. Now, don't get too depressed, because remember, we humans are good at creating supplements for our own deficiencies. Yes, the Industrial Revolution created a massive deficiency of creativity in our brains. But think about what else happened in Europe in the 1800s. Even as the smoke coming out of those factories was blotting out the sun. This was the era when opera became grand opera. This was the era when chamber music became the towering symphonies of Beethoven and Brahms and Bruckner. This is when ballet broke into full form. And this was when many of our concert halls, theaters, galleries, and science academies rose up all around us. You see, we took this huge creative deficiency and we created a supplement that was a grand new era for arts and culture like humanity had never seen before. Humans are creators. So let me ask you, what are you creating to nourish the souls of your community as this creative yarn ball continues to shrink? Beyond lemons, what kind of lemon meringue pie are you creating? Whether brand new inventions or illuminating something from the past, I believe that creation has to be the foundation of our work. We have to meet our fellow humans where they live. As humanity changes, culture has to change right along with it. Now, I recently got to see a brand new invention based on an old story. Sylvia, by the Kate Prince Company, Zoo Nation, was playing at the Old Vic Theater. It tells the story of suffragette Sylvia Pankhurst, and it is in celebration of 100 years since women got the right to vote in England. Now, the creators could very easily have just created a supplement, a couple of speeches, maybe an article or two, but humans are creators. So the creators of Sylvia, they gave us the information and the facts and figures, but they wrapped it in the raw music and voice and dance and costumes and lighting and hip hop and laugh out loud comedy and gut-wrenching sorrow. We didn't work on this show. The show worked on us and the audience, and it was stunning. They produced a supplement that was new and creative and spoke to us as modern-day humans. Culture must create. And this applies to all of us. This is just not just on stage, but off as well. This applies to how we connect with our audiences. This applies to how we ask for support, how we communicate our mission, how we work as a team to tell our stories to the world. We are in the creative industry. We have to all be human creators. So 5,000 years ago, text began this split. And 200 years ago, textiles made it even further apart with the Industrial Revolution. But the biggest revolution was yet to come. From text to textile to technology. Now, it's a fun fact of history that I just recently learned that today's information age can trace its roots all the way back to the textile mills of the Industrial Revolution. One of the great innovations of the age was a machine called the Jacquard loom, which could create complex multicolored tapestries automatically. And how did they store all those patterns of information with a Jacquard loom? With a new invention they created that they called the punch card. And years later, Charles Babbage, the father of the computer, used the Jacquard loom punch card as his inspiration for the computer punch card. And it helped him as he came up with his designs for the first digital stored program computer, which inspired Ada Lovelace to become the first computer programmer, which inspired Alan Turing's work right here in Manchester, which led to the birth of the Manchester baby, the world's first stored program computer, which led to the technology age, the computer age, the information age, and this, the smartphone. So what table do I put the smartphone on? It's millions of rows of programming and data, but it gives us music and art and culture. It could really live on either table. And in fact, any innovation through time kind of could. Text, after all, began this split. But without text, we wouldn't have drama or literature or Oasis song lyrics. And the beautiful music of the Industrial Revolution wouldn't have been possible without logical, complex machines like the piano. Einstein himself asserted that the foundational insights of science could not start with facts and figures. It had to start over here with what he called Einfühlung, literally feeling into things, intuition, creativity. You don't work on the science works on you. So technology could go on either table or in between, but today, this day and age, right now, if I had to choose, I would say it lives on this table. Because our 70,000-year-old brain is wired for creativity. And our 70,000-year-old brain is also wired to work as part of a tribe. And I believe that modern-day technology is beginning to isolate us from each other as humans. And I'm worried that modern technology is breaking apart our tribes. So let's go back to Africa all those years ago. Scientists tell us that every single human on Earth today can trace their lineage back to just a few tribes of Homo sapiens. Imagine that. We were all once on the same team. And for tens of thousands of years, we continued to be communal. And even when they stopped roaming, those tribes settled down into communities. And even after the Industrial Revolution broke up those little villages, we still found community in other ways, like religion. And all the way up through the end of the 20th century, we would all go to our logical day jobs with our assembly lines and our spreadsheets, and then we'd leave it there at the end of the day. And if even just for a few hours, we would come home and spend some time with our creative, intuitive brain. And most importantly, we would play. We would play with each other, with our friends and our neighbors and our families. We would ruminate and argue and laugh and cry. Shared experience that gave us common ground, that gave us empathy, that gave us understanding. But look at the world today. The tribes, long gone. The villages vanished. World religions are shrinking. Rather than gathering together in physical places to play, we're just as likely to spend time alone, getting progressively angrier and more isolated by the images and the words and the sounds coming out of these little electronic rectangles. See, I'm a little worried that modern technology is slowly unraveling what is left of our creative, tribal brains. And if we don't do something, I think we're going to be in some real trouble. Because you see, our ancient brains, they can be fooled by supplements, like lemons or songs. And they can be fooled by creations, like symphonies or pie. But our ancient brains will not be fooled out of needing their tribes. We need to come back together. We need to reconnect people to let the creative brains play in the same space. We need our tribes back. And I have hope. I do. I have hope. Because to me, there is no discipline that is more capable of creating open, welcoming spaces for every human to play together than arts and culture. 5,000 years ago, we rose to the challenge of text by inventing arts and culture. And 200 years ago, we rose to the challenge of the Industrial Revolution by taking arts and culture to a whole new level. And today, it is incumbent on every single one of us to invent a grand new golden age for arts and culture for every single human. It's literally up to us now. So that night that I went to see Sylvia, the audience was full. The audience was full with just as many women as men. The audience was full with just as many young people as older folks. And on that stage and in that audience was a wonderful diversity that looked like the faces you would see in international London on any given day. And in that brand new production, telling a 100-year-old story on that 200-year-old stage, we in the audience whooped and hollered and laughed and learned and cried together as one single human tribe, just like maybe we would have 70,000 years ago. You see, as text and textile and technology is slowly driving our brains and our people apart, I believe that arts and culture holds the promise to weave us all back together. So what is your organization doing to bring your community together? And I mean your whole community, not just your current audience. Every single part are you playing in making that happen? Because I don't think that this is something that one can opt out of. Culture is an essential human nutrient. What can we all be doing to weave together every single person into one human tribe? I think it needs to start in every community and at each of your organizations. And so to reflect on that, I'm going to close with 3 questions for you. What is the vitamin that your community needs to prevent their creative scurvy? And what is the supplement that you can create that will meet your community where they are? And how can you use that supplement to weave together every single human in your community so that together we can weave together every single human on this pale blue dot? 3 simple questions. Work on the answers as if humanity itself depends on it, because it might. Slip inside the eye of your mind. Don't you know you might find a better place to play? I thank you for letting me spin my yarn. Thank you.